Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our next panel discussion in the Future of Education Summit webinar series, presented by Data3 in partnership with Snapdragon. We'd like to begin by acknowledging the wisdom of the original innovators and the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all gathering from across Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and community, and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Scott Miller, and it's my absolute pleasure to be your MC and moderator for tonight's discussion. And tonight's session is all around future-ready classrooms, powering learning with next-gen devices. This discussion aims to bring together educators and technology leaders from across Australia to look at how we're reimagining what learning looks like in today's connected classrooms. As schools continue to evolve, one thing is certain. Technology is no longer just a classroom tool. It's become the foundation that helps teachers engage students, personalize learning, and prepare young people for a rapidly changing world. But innovation does bring challenges. How do schools create digital environments that are reliable, sustainable, and adaptable? How can we make technology choices today that remain relevant for tomorrow? And how do we best prepare our young people for an ever-changing future beyond our school gates? Tonight, we'll be diving into how Data3 and Snapdragon are helping schools elevate their digital maturity through next-generation technologies that support stronger learning outcomes, reduce administrative pressures, and allow teachers to focus on what they do best: teaching. Now, before we introduce our speakers, I would love to acknowledge Data3 for their long-standing commitment to supporting schools from across Australia. For decades, Data3 has helped educators modernise classrooms, manage technology more efficiently, and deliver digital transformation that genuinely improves teaching and learning. I also would like to highlight Snapdragon, whose next-generation computing platforms are powering a new era of classroom technology. Snapdragon devices are built for modern learning environments with all-day battery life and built-in AI that supports creativity and personalized experiences. Together, Data3 and Snapdragon are redefining what it means to create a digital ecosystem that is powerful, sustainable, and ready for the future. Before we dive into the panel discussion, we're joined by Yasmin Mendoza from Data3, who'll share a quick overview of Data3's current education initiatives and their partnership with Qualcomm, the team behind Snapdragon. Yaz, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Good evening, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Data3 in partnership with Qualcomm and HP. We're thrilled to have you join us as we explore how cutting-edge technology is shaping the future of education. The future-ready classroom is not just about connectivity. It's about creating an environment where learning is personalised, inclusive, and powered by intelligent tools. Artificial intelligence is at the heart of this transformation, and today our speakers will explore how technology from companies like Qualcomm and HP is enabling this change. For example, the new Qualcomm Snapdragon platform is designed to deliver high performance with exceptional energy efficiency, making these devices ideal for education environments where reliability and mobility matter. This means real-time insights, personal learning experiences, and enhanced privacy without the need to send data to the cloud. And it's not just about performance. Snapdragon-powered devices offer multi-day battery life, seamless multitasking, and robust security features, ensuring that learning continues uninterrupted wherever it happens. Today, we'll dive deeper into these capabilities, share practical examples, and discuss how schools can start building future-ready classrooms. So stay tuned and let's explore how technology is transforming education. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you so much, Yaz. It's always inspiring to hear how Data3 is supporting educators across Australia and helping schools adopt technology that makes teaching more effective and learning more engaging. Now, before we get into the discussion, I'd love to introduce our incredible panel joining us for today. Each of them brings unique perspectives on how technology is shaping the future of learning. First up, we have the phenomenal Brett Salakers, an education ambassador at HP. Brett is an international education ambassador, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and the founder of Aussie Ed, which was once Australia's largest online network of teachers. Named one of the top 100 most influential leaders in education globally, Brett is passionate about connection, collaboration, and helping teachers turn educational theory into real classroom practice. As well as Brett, we're also joined by Amir Buchan, ANZ Commercial Channel Lead for Snapdragon Compute. Amir is the ANZ Commercial Channel Lead for Snapdragon Compute, where he works closely with partners like Data3 to help schools modernise their technology ecosystems. With extensive experience in business development and channel strategy, Amir plays a key role in expanding the reach of Snapdragon-powered devices through innovative, future-focused initiatives that support both education and industry. And last but not least, we have a familiar face joining us, Megan King, the Deputy Principal at Canterbury College. As well as being the Deputy Principal at Canterbury College, Megan's also the co founder of the Future of Education Summit with me. She's an experienced educational leader, author, and innovator with a proven track record of leading change across Prep to 12 contexts. Recognised as one of Australia's most influential educators, Megan has a deep understanding of how to balance innovation with strong pedagogy and community leadership. Thank you all for joining us for our panel discussion today. Now, I know we've got education leaders joining us from across the country in school contexts, in industry, and working at the cross section of both of those. And my first question for each of you is really kicking off and thinking big picture. If we stepped into future ready classrooms tomorrow, what would we see? What would the technologies being used look like? And what are the skills that students would be developing as we think about future classrooms? Brett, did you want to kick us off? What do you think our future ready classrooms are going to look like?
Yeah, I might say instead of saying what will we see, it's what should we see. And what should we see is actually tech not front and center. We should see students doing learning. We should see a lot of the traditional sorts of things that we're familiar with. We want problem solving. We want teachers being able to challenge. We want that humanity, that networking, that talking, that deep thinking. We want that rigor and that challenge because we want students that are going to be able to network with each other, talk with each other, be able to cope with the pressures of life and cope with it when they don't quite know the answer, and then be able to seek solutions. Now, the way they seek those solutions will be tech infused. They will be able to grab AI. They will be able to deep dive. They will be able to communicate not just with people physically in their room, but maybe students in the classroom next door, or perhaps even students in classrooms on the other side of the world. But it's that gentle integration, that behind the scenes, that tech where it's all the hard work has been done to make it look incredibly easy and like it's not even there. That is the classroom of the future.
That's fantastic. And I love to hear that human centered approach that you talked about, Brett. It's not necessarily designing classrooms and learning experiences around the technology, it's having great learning experiences for our students and then using technology to bolster that. Megan, I'd love to ask the same question of you because from your experience, you work in a K 12 school. You see everything from the littlest humans up to the biggest kids, all using technology to infuse their learning as they prepare for life beyond the school gates. From your perspective, what are some of the things you think we should be seeing or could be seeing in the future of education and the future of classrooms when it comes to technology?
Yeah, it's a great starting question. And thank you, Brett, because I think he, segued perfectly into what I'm going to say about this with my, very firm teacher, educator, leader in a school hat on. And I absolutely believe that everything starts with pedagogy, and that's what we've started this conversation with. So technology needs to be woven tightly into whatever that pedagogical framework is. And I agree with Brett, it's what it should look like. You want to see students working on really authentic inquiry-driven projects. Students using cloud tools where they're co-authoring portfolios. Maybe there's some learners that are using AI tools to draft things, to reflect or, iterate there on ideas. But, teachers are still going to be there, very much focused on coaching higher order thinking, metacognition. That's all got to be happening all the time. And I guess where we see the tech coming in is that our assessment continues to be ongoing. It continues to be multimodal. There's so many opportunities for short video reflection now, for peer feedback cycles that, use our tech effectively. Teacher moderated rubrics, we're seeing more and more of it, and it'd be great to see even more. It's visible to students, it's live, it's active. I guess really explicit routines for digital citizenship is very important now and in the future. We talk about student voice, but we have to have our students very much understanding how to use that tech effectively and in the right sorts of way. I guess when students can start to tell you how the tech helped them solve a real world problem, we'll know that we're doing pretty well.
Absolutely. And I love that. It's all centered around it's that connection, it's that collaboration, and that creation piece, and really giving students a diverse range of opportunities instead of it always being essay writing, for example, as an assessment piece, having those multimodal approaches where they can use the tools, they can use the devices, they can use the platforms that really excite them the most, but also link best with what they're learning in the classroom. And I think that's just so exciting from a teaching perspective as well, because as a teacher, you've got so many tools at your disposal to really create those real, relevant, and relatable learning experiences for students. Now, Amir, I know with your work looking at Snapdragon, you would see some phenomenal case studies from across the country and around the world of how Snapdragon devices are being used and how schools across the country and around the world are using technology and different devices. Can you share with us some of those insights? What are you starting to see from those really future-focused schools? How are they integrating technology, and what does that look like for them?
Yeah, look, just around what the others have said, I think it's really important. It's just the human at the center of the technology that they're leveraging. We don't want technology to become the barrier of learning. Like if you think about something as simple as a math equation, and when you're starting to use a keyboard, you start to create a barrier in terms of, how do I input something into a device? And that creates a cognitive load on a student for them, and that creates a barrier for them. And so for us, what we're seeing working really well is there's some things Snapdragon does that helps amplify, I think, what the benefits are from an education perspective, but it's also around how do we think about the device really activating parts of the brain that are key for learning. So like we all know that touch and pen input is really important for learning, for retaining information. So we know that we want technology to amplify that ability to learn. How do we create a really great pen experience? How do we create a really good connectivity experience? How do we enable things like true multi-day battery life? Because I know that battery life is a really big blocker from an education perspective, because you don't want students charging devices all day, creating OHS hazards and tripping hazards, right? And so for us, when we're thinking about the devices we're putting into the hands of the student, we really want the device to be an enabler for learning, and helping them actually accelerate their abilities, instead of becoming a blocker or a barrier for their learning. But look, we're kind of in the beginnings of this. We're seeing a pretty massive transformational change when it comes to our technology and how schools are starting to leverage it. But things like battery life, things like performance, things like different form factors of the devices that they're using that help accelerate that learning are really important.
Absolutely. And Brent, did you have any thoughts on this as well? Because I know you and Amir work closely together, and you've seen some of this stuff happening in action. Anything that you wanted to add?
Look, I think it's really important just to sort of say, like, I love that all three of us, coming from different aspects of the education industry, all had a very student-centered, human-centered, experience-centered response to your question. And I had flashbacks when Amir was talking to just then, to a conversation I had with the wonderful Australian Genevieve Bell, who helped sort of set up the school of AI over in the US, one of the big institutions over there, and founded the School of Cybernetics at ANU here in Australia, and actually is currently the vice chancellor there. And I remember her talking, because you just in your talk there said that the one thing that I think every educator knows when they hear people talk about AI, and you went straight to what essays will look like in the future. And you mentioned essays and AI, and we still want students thinking and all that sort of stuff. And I love the terminology, and I think this is really important, where the difference when we talk about AI and we talk about technological developments, and we know that obviously AI is going to be one of these big parts of it. But then we walk the umbrella of where does AI sit actually within this technological development. And so the level up from AI amongst all sorts of digital systems is that cybernetics. And the concept of cybernetics is digital systems that actually serve us, that serve humans. And I think sometimes we get so caught up on AI being its own thing off to the side, and AI is going to go ahead, and humans are going to get cut out of the loop. As soon as we look at it more from that understanding of AI is part of cybernetics, the whole concept of cybernetics is to serve humans. And I just was listening to how we were all answering the question there about the future of schools and what does a future ready classroom look like and all that sort of stuff. Everything we said was funneling back to the human, funneling back to the teacher, most importantly, funneling back to the students and their learning experiences they're going to get. So I think whenever we talk about these things, we want to talk about these digital systems, but they all need to serve learning. They all need to serve the student. They need to help the teacher do their teaching. But the more that we can talk about technology that serves humans, I think the closer we are to where we need to be in education.
Absolutely. I definitely agree, Brett. And I think also what was great to see is it's that technology serving humans for so many different purposes, but also as Amir touched on with things like multi-day battery life, it's technology that meets us where we are. I remember 10, 15 years ago, if you walked into most schools, the idea of technology was it was confined to a computer lab. And only 15 years ago, in 2010, you would have seen, all right, where does technology happen? Well, you go into that dark, dingy, windowless computer lab, everyone sits down and they do their hour of technology for the day or for the week. And that's sort of it. Whereas I think these days, with the devices that we have available, and when you've got devices with strong multi-day battery life as well, you can be learning anywhere and you can be leveraging AI, you can be using digital tools, whether you're out on the oval, whether you're in a science lab, in a performing arts space. And it really is no longer just for that technology subject. Technology is a key part of
And
what
you
we
know
do for
what?
everything.
Very, very, very importantly, and to reiterate that whole a point from Amir there about that long life, the long life battery. We are fools if we think in the modern world learning only occurs between 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. We have devices now that allow us to tap into the whole entire collective knowledge of the human race 24/7. So we want our students to be able to have a device that can work all day at school, but we want them to be able to tap in and do their homework. We want them to be so in love with what they've learned at, I'm sure Canterbury College, some of the most fantastic teachers that we have. We want them to walk away from their biology lesson and be absolutely buzzing and want to Google something or want to jump on YouTube and check it out and learn a little bit more. And we want to give our students and give our teachers the devices that can carry those needs.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of devices and speaking of technology and what that looks like in different contexts, my next question for each of you, as we get warmed up, is doing a bit of crystal ball gazing and saying, well, look, what are the technologies, the shifts that are getting you guys most excited? Now, I know if you go to any sort of conference, if you go to any PD around technology, there's conversations around schools setting up metaverses and metaverse campuses where students are learning in a fully virtual world. You've seen some schools that are looking at implementing generative AI across all of their different subject areas. You've got students in art creating AI pieces. And we've also seen a whole rise in robotics and automation and things like that. When we think about the future of technology more broadly, I'd love to hear from each of you what the shifts are and the technologies that you're watching, saying, well, look, I think in the next 10, 15 years, this could be something really interesting. Megan, I might start with you on this one. What technology shift excites you the most, thinking about the next 10 years?
Yeah, I'm really focused on my answer here, not being about hype. It's not about hype, but definitely teacher-centered AI workflows. For me, are really exciting. We've just talked about it in the last one as well. I think anything that can augment a teacher's practice at the point of need for that teacher at that time in that class is going to be fantastic. So, we want to scale our quality feedback. We want to see what that looks like in an English classroom, in a humanities classroom. We don't want to replace any professional judgment, but we want to be able to, jump in and use that as part of our workflow. And I think I'm going to keep saying that anything that we can move in as part of the way the teachers are doing things. So inside the learning management system that particular school use, inside the assessment tools that they're already using or that they're already familiar with. Anything, again, I'll go back to it regularly, I'm sure, but anything that supports pedagogy rather than distracts from it is something that's going to excite me.
Absolutely. And I think in today's world where we do have so much on our plates as educators and we're seeing the ongoing teacher shortage across the country playing out, I think anything we can do to help teachers work smarter, not harder, and take things off their plate and save them time is so key. Amir, a similar question from your perspective. I know you're working at the cutting edge when it comes to the sort of technology that we're putting in our devices, but from your perspective, looking 10 years into the future, what are sort of tech trends exciting you the most? What are the technologies you're watching?
Yeah, look, there's probably two major trends that I think are relevant for this discussion. The first is if you know a little bit about Snapdragon, I think what we're leading is the move to ARM. So for those that don't know what ARM is, it's an instruction set. It's basically your hardware talking to the software of the computer. So what we're doing is leading the transition from what we call x86, which is another instruction set, what you probably are more familiar with today, moving to ARM. If you think about ARM as the platform, you're using it today. So you have like phones and tablets, they're all using this instruction set. And what's fundamental is we have a different experience in our personal lives than what we do when we typically go to school or go to work or with the devices that we're provided. If you think about your phone has all day battery life. All the apps work really fast. People don't know what chipsets are in their phones. Everything just it's a really really good experience. And then when we kind of go into the classroom, the experience is just really different. It's like I'm not getting all day battery life. Is my device performative enough for the task that I'm trying to do? And so the big shift that we're seeing is the compute space moving to this instruction set, which provides you with that performance and battery life and AI capabilities kind of baked in with the things that you're experiencing today. So that's one major shift, and we're kind of leading that space for Windows. The second one is I don't want to say the word AI too much because it's that's kind of the hot topic today, but agentic AI. And so if you think about the device plugging in to you instead of the device being the center, I think that's a really interesting shift. So again, for those that aren't familiar with Snapdragon, we kind of have like Snapdragon is a brand of Qualcomm. We have chips in everything. The wearables, XR headsets. The new glasses that take photos and videos and all that sort of stuff. So we're kind of like the backbone of a lot of technology that exists today. And what's really interesting is this shift around okay, I have maybe some AI capabilities on this device and maybe some on another device, and moving that framing to being the AI in the center, and then everything kind of plugs in. And what that really enables us to do, if you think about it from a student or a learning perspective, is how can how can I start to learn in a different manner that's more adapted to myself? So if I look at my previous experience in school, I was probably not the best student, but it's probably because I had a different way of wanting to learn or a different desire to learn. I always think about this comic I saw probably in 2010, which had it was like a whole bunch of different type of animals, and it was like they're in a classroom and the exam was to climb a tree. And so you had like a giraffe, an elephant, and a monkey. And then so you had all of these different animals, but the exam was really benefiting kind of one type of individual. And so I think what's different here is we have so many different types of students and they all learn in incredibly different ways. But we don't really have a way of unlocking that customized learning capability. And I think that's what's really exciting about agentic AI is to say, hey, if you like to learn in a slightly different way to others, how can your devices start to learn that and then be able to provide you with the ways that make sense for you? So that's what I'm pretty excited about.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think particularly in today's future of work where it changes so quickly, I think most educators are in agreement that these days it's not necessarily about teaching students the content and making sure students are subject matter experts. It's making sure that they know how to learn and they've got that love of learning. And I think anything we can do to help our students sort of unlock the secrets of their brain and learn better and have that love of learning, the better. Now, Brett, I'd love to dive into some questions for you and dive a little bit deeper into this conversation. I think we've set a really nice foundation looking at the future of technology in our classrooms. But I'd love to understand from your perspective the role called digital natives. Now, I know Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they've been nicknamed digital natives. As the young people in our classrooms today, they don't know a world without Wi-Fi, touchscreen devices, and social media. And whilst that's presents some really exciting opportunities, they can play around in VR, create augmented reality experiences, jump onto Copilot like it's nobody's business. I think sometimes we can see some challenges where they don't know sometimes the basics. Can you talk to me about how modern devices and how technology these days is being used to sort of bridge those gaps and sort of address some of the baseline things that students need to know around how to use a device responsibly and safely, but also to still extend their learning as well?
Yeah, look, funnily enough, I'm gonna be take the controversial route and say I don't actually like the term digital natives, because I think it brings up a couple of assumptions. One of which you addressed actually in fleshing that out. So you are very, very correct in saying, yeah, okay, so Gen Alpha, Gen Z, all that sort of stuff, they may have grown up in a world where there are lots of devices. That doesn't necessarily mean they are great at wielding those devices for their learning. What it probably means is they're fantastic consumers of digital technologies, not necessarily wonderful creators. And that's the big challenge. How do we get them to be able to learn how to create with modern digital tools rather than consume with modern digital tools? And that's where having the right sort of tech, having the right sort of device in front of students, and most importantly, the right teacher who's setting that work up. Those two things allow us to actually be able to meet the students where they are. And of course, one of the digital native challenges is when you look at a country like Australia, and we have that great big land, and we've got kids that we need to talk to in outback New South Wales, or kids that are up near Cape York, and obviously kids that are in Sydney or Melbourne. They have very, very different experiences and very, very different exposures. So the experience level of digital integration that they might come to school with is something that we need to cater for. We can't just say, yeah, all right, all the Gen Alphas that are coming into kindergarten right now are digital natives, because the reality is we have haves and have nots, and if we assume that everyone is coming from a similar starting point, then we're actually disadvantaging our youth. So what we need to do is make sure we have the right tools in the right places in the classrooms, and the teachers are setting up those opportunities to teach them how to create with whatever it might be, doing a project, collaborating, jumping on a Teams call, jumping on a Zoom, making a project, doing the research, building their own sort of AI tool rather than consuming content from things. That sort of work. Those are the things that we do to make sure the youth of Australia uses digital school skills in the right way.
Absolutely. And I think it's making them aware of their learning as well and really highlighting, well, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it. And that really leads into my next question for you, Brett, which is around maintaining that human connection that is at the center of learning. I know there are some conversations around replacing teachers with AI tutors and things like that. And also, too, sometimes students that just want to be on their device and they won't pay attention to their teacher in the classroom. But can you talk to me around how any tips or strategies that you think educators watching could use to still maintain that human connection, that face-to-face connection, and highlight, the learning that students are doing, but using technology to complement all of that?
Yeah, I think the people who say that there is a risk of teachers being replaced by AI are people who have not really spent much time in the classroom. They are people who are telling or selling a solution to the education industry rather than people who are experienced at actually teaching. I tell you now, zero 15-year-olds do linear equations in a maths class because the computer screen says, do this linear equation. They do the linear equation because Miss or Sir up the front of the classroom for the last 2 weeks has been explaining it on the whiteboard, and they've sat next to them and gone through it with them. And then the teacher has said, let's do this. They do it because of the relationship. Now, the excellent part, and this is what gets me really, really excited about particularly that agentic learning that we've just heard about, and especially like those teacher workflows, and being able to sort of lighten some of that teacher workload. What gets me super, super excited is the more that we can do that, the more that we can have tools that maybe help teachers review some work or respond to some of the administrative burden that teachers have. The more we can take that administrative burden off teachers and have the agentic stuff respond and do that stuff that might be with the curriculum documentation and the programming and that sort of side of things, the more we free up the teacher to actually be able to sit with the child. So in a weird way, so that we had the word pedagogy be used before. Obviously, pedagogy comes from the ancient Greek. A ped meaning child. It's how children learn, how we teach children. So looking at the child. So the old pedagogue, the ancient Greek pedagogue, who was the tutor, the mentor, the advisor to the child developing. I actually think if we get AI right, and if we use AI in a way that we can have it lighten that administrative burden on the teacher, then we can actually go back to that traditional meaning of the concept of teacher, that traditional pedagogue, where the role of teacher actually becomes more human-centered and more about developing the individual. And I think we're much better off as a society if that's the road we go on. I don't want a conversation. I hope we don't get a conversation where we start talking about, let's have like a certain language, CIO of a certain language app may have said recently about having teachers being replaced by AI tutors. It's not really going to work. Like a small percentage of the population are self-driven and self-motivated for that. Research has very, very conclusively stated that is not going to be applicable for most learners. What we want is that supportive structures that help those workflows, that reduce that administrative burden, and let our teachers develop that human relationship with the students in their care. And the right tech can enable that to happen.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. And I think even for myself, some of my favorite examples of AI in the classroom that I've seen in the past semester have been teachers using it to reduce admin when it comes to excursion paperwork and reporting and all of the admin that they have to do that is outside of the classroom. And I think that's where we can see AI being used to do some really exciting things. Thank you, Brett. Now, Megan, I'm going to jump to you next because I know you've been doing some really exciting work in the school space. And you've since we've worked together, I've seen you lead so many large-scale innovation projects across school communities. And obviously, when you do that, you've got to engage so many different stakeholders. Obviously, the students, the parents, the teachers, bringing them all along on the journey. But I know, as you and I have talked about, it's different generations as well. You've got those young people that have grown up in a world that are really tech savvy and digitally literate and they get it. But then you've also got some of those stakeholders that are a little bit more wary of technology, maybe aren't as familiar with it from other generations. Can you talk to us around what you see the key ingredients are for successfully embedding digital change when you've got so many different stakeholders in a school community?
Yeah, for sure. I think digital change, we've already started talking about this, but digital change is never actually about the technology first. It always starts with the people, the purpose, and the process. They're the things that you have to think about all of the time. So, starting with that really clear purpose that you are articulating to your community. What is that student learning or capability that we're actually trying to strengthen? That needs to be clear. So when our technology that we're bringing in directly supports that purpose, we go back to that concept that it becomes an enabler. It's not a distraction. It actually enables that purpose. I think the other thing that is really important and probably the most important is distributed leadership. And whenever you are trying to bring in something that is, a large scale, whether that's an innovation project, whether or not that's, a digital change, whatever we're talking about, then you need to make sure that you've got teachers, you've got students, and you've got all of the teams that are involved that actually have a voice in the design. They actually have a part in that, because if they're not involved in that implementation and what you actually do, then I would tell you without a doubt it is completely unsustainable. I think this is a problem that lots of schools have, that you often have a single champion. You have somebody in your school that this is their thing, this is their jam. They love digital change. They're all about it. They're the ones that are up there telling us all about the different tools and tech and what's going on. But if they are not bringing everybody along on the journey, if they are not helping the school understand why we're embedding that, and I guess each of those people, those stakeholders getting little wins along the way, then it's actually not going to stick. So I think finally, I would say with this one, as a leader, I need to pay attention to staff workload, which obviously then impacts wellbeing. It's something that we talk about a lot. I think there was somebody that got up, I heard about a principal recently who said, work intensification is not a thing. Well, that's a pretty foolish thing to say. Work intensification is a thing. So anything, any rollout that you do that ignores the capability, the capacity of your staff will fail more often than not. So I think you've got to think about all those things. I was actually at a session last night. It was really interesting and timely for this, talking about AI replacing. And I think Brett just mentioned that teachers are not going to be replaced. That's not going to happen. But it was really interesting hearing about a school that's got virtual staff and in-person staff. But the virtual staff were from an AI perspective, but they were looking at things like policy development. They were looking at the fact that they were doing a lot of research about that school, and they were actually designing some policies that would be used. But they actually have the capacity to answer questions from the community, from the staff, from the students, from the community about those policies and how it applied to them. So I thought that was fascinating. I thought it was really interesting. Obviously, we use AI to manage our calendars, to take notes. There's so many things that we do already. But what's that next step going to be? It's going to be really interesting, but I think it's always going to start with people, purpose, process.
Absolutely. I love that. People, purpose, and process. I think that's something that every school leader should have up on a wall or on a whiteboard somewhere as they're considering digital change. And with that, I'd like to lead into a question for Amir, just before we wrap up our panel discussion for the session today. Now, Amir, I know Megan's been talking about her experiences rolling this out, and I know that she's worked at some phenomenal schools across the country, but with your work at Snapdragon, I think you'd get a really interesting insight into such a wide range of schools across the country, from across systems and sectors and cities. Can you talk to us around what common themes you're seeing from schools as they work to roll out new devices in their school community, and how are you responding to some of those needs, or what advice would you have for educators looking at rolling out new devices in a school community?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of common themes. I'll probably start off with, it's a very complex environment. We have lots of schools, there's so much technology, it's changing so rapidly, and it's quite difficult in that environment to look at all of these and go, which one will benefit the learning outcomes of students or help teachers be able to, create easier lesson plans, or, be able to mark up homework, all those sorts of things. And so what I see work really well is there's schools that we work with that have a very clear strategy. And I think that, people, process, that terminology, I think, works really well here, because it really guides the school in exactly where they want to go. And the technology follows those processes. So if you have the goal in mind, what technology fits into that to create the outcomes that you're looking for. The other common themes that I'm seeing is some of the schools are really struggling with just the basics, right? If you think about, not to harp on about things like battery life, but, we've just done recently a case study with another school who very clearly indicated that, they're getting 2 to 3 hour battery, 2 to 3 day battery life with the Snapdragon devices that they've just procured. And their previous devices, they were getting 2 to 3 hours. So again, those blockers are really massive for students. And when we interviewed one of the students at the school, it was basically, I wasn't using the device that I was given. I wasn't using the tools and the capabilities because it just seemed difficult. It just seemed like a blocker. But just expanding that battery life into multi-day has created a completely different experience for the student, for them to learn. The other thing is performance. So what a lot of people don't understand or appreciate is, if you think about a student typically not having their device plugged in all day, your device doesn't run at full performance when it's unplugged, right? There's sometimes between a 30 to 45% drop in performance. And so if you think about a creative student or a media student trying to edit videos and all that sort of stuff, it becomes really difficult because, again, it creates a barrier. The device isn't performing as well as it needs to be. And we don't have that on a Snapdragon product. So you don't see a drop in performance. Again, if you think about your phone, do you expect it to run better when it's charging? No. You expect it to work at 100% all the time. And so those two elements, which is like battery life and performance, I think it's kind of the basic stuff. But then also, what is the strategy for the school in terms of the outcomes that they want? And then lastly, the common theme is obviously there's lots about AI, right? And so it's like, which one do I go down the route of? Which one do I pick? How do I enable that for students and teachers? And then there's a processor in our products, or people have probably heard the terminology Copilot plus PC. If you think about that as a terminology, it's just a standard, right? It's a standard set by Microsoft that your device has this minimum specification. And one of the elements within that specification is a chipset called an NPU, or a neural processing unit, which is specifically designed for AI capabilities and workloads. And I think that's one of the elements that I think for any school, that terminology Copilot plus PC needs to be effectively mandatory moving forward, because there's so many capabilities that will come that are available today, but will come in the future that can leverage on-device AI, not necessarily having to go to the cloud every time. And if connectivity is an issue, not being able to get the benefit of what you want. Again, reducing those blockers.
Absolutely. And I think anything we can do to reduce those blockers for educators makes such a difference. I know even for myself, I was in a school in a regional community just at the end of last week. And the students I was chatting to, they were using their devices, and we only had a short amount of time with them. But just to get them to turn their devices on, logged on and on the internet took 15 minutes just to get that all up and running and happening. And then when they did get on their devices, the device died after 2 hours. So the school had to book 3 separate blocks of computer banks just so they could have fresh devices coming in. And when you just think about that as far as the lost productivity and the lost learning time in the classroom, but also to the additional strain on school resources to have 3 banks of computers booked out is just absolutely crazy. So I think it's so exciting to hear that these conversations being had and there are solutions out
there. Yeah, if you think about even AI, like today, a lot of the AI is running in the cloud. And so you're going to need really great connectivity within a school to get those capabilities. But we're going to see a pretty seismic shift on device AI, as long as your device has the chipset to enable that. So if you think of like, say, if a student's using ChatGPT, we always worry about these AI chatbots, because they have the ability to hallucinate, not provide the correct information. But we're getting to a point where a lot of those large language models can actually run on the device. So they're reliable, they're private, they're secure, it lives on device, everything is done on device. And I think that's a really important shift of what's going to happen in education, to provide accurate information to students when they're leveraging these technologies.
Absolutely. Now, I might keep you here, Amir, and I'll bring Brett and Megan back to the stage, because we're just about to wrap up our webinar as part of the Future of Education Summit webinar series. And I think what I've loved about this discussion is it's been focused on people. It's been focused on our students and our teachers. And yes, technology creates some phenomenal opportunities, but I've loved that each and every one of you have talked about the humans at the center. It's human-centric design and making sure that we're taking things off our teachers' plates and creating immersive learning experiences for students. Now, for each of you, just before we finish up, I'd love to see in 30 seconds, if you can give me a short, sharp answer. A lot of our educators watching, they're planning for the year ahead. They're thinking about what next year looks like for them. And for many schools, they're doing a bit of a digital stock take. They're looking at the tools, the devices, the tech that they've got in their school community and thinking about, well, for next year, what could I do differently? How could I transform some of the devices and some of the technologies that I'm using to better enhance learning experiences for students and to reduce staff workload? Where do they start? 30 seconds for an educator or a school leader thinking about planning technology strategy for the year ahead. Where can they start? Megan, I might start with you. What would your advice be?
Well, funnily enough, we are doing that right at the moment. Actually, we've just finished that process, because we are thinking about We have one-to-one devices. We're really blessed. We're really lucky here for our students from year 3. All of our teachers have them. We have incredible devices. Probably a great time to say that we use Data3 to supply us with all of our devices. And I guess for me, what we've gone through with this process of now saying, all right, we're about to get something different or new, or what could it look like? What should it look like? What did we consider? We considered environmental and financial sustainability. That's really important for schools. You've got to think about that. What is that cost going to cost over a period of time? If you're going like we do with a, we don't have BYOD, we supply the devices, so therefore we're going into lease agreements. We think about the device that we're choosing. We think about with the platforms like the life cycle, what the licensing models look like, anything from a shared resource. We think a lot about partnerships. We think about that because we don't want to reinvent the wheel all the time. So, if you're working with a vendor that really understands your school, understands your context, building that relationship with the vendor as well as with your community is actually really important, because it does mean then that you're being, a premium service for your community, which is really important. And it's probably our responsibility to make sure that's happening because things go wrong with devices. And so what does that look like for you in your school? Certainly for me, one of the things that's been really important is the fact that our kids, because they're kids, they drop their device, they step on their device, they do all sorts of things that we would like them not to do, but it happens. So what does that look like? We have an incredible situation there where they can get replacements, and it's looked after seamlessly through our IT department and with Data3 and the providers that we use. So I think that that's very important for leadership to consider, okay, this is when it's perfect. This is what it looks like when everything's going really well. But what does it look like when it's not going so well as well? It's important. I think the same messaging, right? Make your decision and lead with transparency. Make sure that you've got lots of people involved in your decision making, and you're sharing that really openly with your team, with your staff, but then also with your parents, with your community. And we do a lot of work in that, because then people understand why you've taken this pathway, why you've particularly chosen that path, that particular device, sorry. We're all about inking. So, the device that we have needs to have a pen, all of those sorts of things. It might seem like the community don't need to know, but they do. They need to know that's a part of our decision-making, because it links back to, sorry, I'm going to say it again, the pedagogical practice that we want to see in our classroom. So our device is actually there to support that, that practice that we want to do.
No, that's fantastic. And I love that piece around bringing the community along for the ride as well. I think that's so important. Right, from your perspective, what's one thing that school leaders can do as they plan their technology and their digital tools for 2026?
Yeah, look, I'll be a little bit quick, but have you ever heard of Seth Godin and his concept of purple cow? Have you ever heard of the purple cow?
I haven't heard
Anyway,
Purple Cow specifically.
all right.
Yeah, give us the Spark Notes.
Yeah. But very, very, very well, very worthwhile having a deep dive into Seth Godin and purple cow. But basically, the concept is if you're driving down the countryside and you're going past farm after farm, you look over, you see brown cow, and you're looking, and it doesn't take long before every cow looks the same, and you can't see one cow from another and all that sort of stuff. But if you drove past a purple cow, that cow would be remarkable. That cow would stand out. You would remember a purple cow in amongst all of the brown cows. So I mean, it's a marketing sort of concept in that if you make your story, your narrative remarkable, it becomes memorable. We want our teaching to be remarkable. We want our teachers to do remarkable lessons. Now, the trap is, because we want our students to be able to remember, that's why we need remarkable teachers. But the thing is, within a school, to answer your question, what could a school do? Teachers are very, very good at playing the role of student. They like to do, what the institution sort of guides them. They follow the expectations of leadership. So we need remarkable leaders in schools who can green light and give permission early and upfront for our teachers to be brave and bold and try things and make remarkable lessons. We need remarkable teachers, remarkable leaders to greenlight the creation of remarkable lessons. And the more remarkable we can make our teaching lessons, the better the students will be able to maintain and remember those purple cow lessons, because they will stand out, that information will be better, and our students will be able to achieve more because of that. So when we're looking at our tech, greenlight that remarkable opportunity so your teachers can be brave and they can make fun, engaging, and memorable content.
I love that, Brett. And I think for all of us as we plan for 2026, what are our purple cows are going to be questions that we asked in staff rooms across the country. And Amir, from your perspective, what's one thing that you'd recommend for school leaders thinking about their tech strategy for next year?
Yeah, look, the one thing I would say is future-proofing. And the reason I say that specifically is because if we just use the word AI again, look at what's happened in the last 18 months and the disruption it's caused, but also the value proposition that it brings. The next 18 months, it's going to be even crazier. And so what we're trying to make sure we educate our customers about is to say, the decision you make today will have impact in the next 2 to 3 years. So if you think of the normal life cycle, it's typically a 2 to 3 year life cycle. You don't want to be in a situation where you've purchased something today with the needs of today, but then all of a sudden with 2 to 3 years, there's certain things you can't access because of the decision that you've made, and that life cycle needs to be sped up. And so the one takeaway would be, think about the next 2 to 3 years and make sure that whatever decision you're making today is adaptable for what may come in that time frame.
That's fantastic.
Is what you're saying. Talk to Data3 and buy a fantastic HP device that's future-proofed and powered by a Snapdragon. I love it.
It's almost like we planned this.
Absolutely, buy a Snapdragon. Yeah, but I think that the other element is definitely be talking to your value partner like Data3. Like they have all the latest and greatest information, and they're a great source to understand what that landscape may look like from a technology perspective. But yeah, absolutely what Brett said.
That's fantastic. No, I love these insights. I think the key takeaways for me are understanding, doing some crystal ball gazing and say, in 2 or 3 years, what's it going to look like? Thinking about, as well, as Megan touched on, best case, but also worst case scenarios. What happens when things don't go to plan, but how can we bring our community along with the journey? And as Brett touched on as well, it's acting boldly. And as a leader, giving those green lights so we can create those purple cow moments, those really memorable, those really unique learning experiences. A massive thank you to our 3 phenomenal panelists, Amir, Brett, and Megan, for joining us on our webinar today. And I'd like to say thank you all for sharing your insights and experiences this evening. Now, before we wrap up, I'd also like to say a massive thank you as well to Data3 and Snapdragon for powering today's session and for the incredible work they're doing to support schools across Australia. Together, they're helping educators unlock the full potential of next-generation devices to create classrooms that are smarter, more sustainable, and ready for the future. I'm also incredibly excited to share that the Future of Education Summit will return in 2026 with events across Queensland. These gatherings bring together educators, innovators, and industry partners to explore the big ideas shaping the next decade of learning. If you're leading innovative work in your school or community and loved the conversation that we've had here today, we'd love to feature at one of our upcoming summits. This is your chance to showcase what's working, connect with like-minded educators, and help shape the future of learning together. You can find all the details on our website. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you to Data3 and Snapdragon for their partnership. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you all very, very soon. Thanks, guys.